All right, here we go. Welcome into Hawk Talk on Melrose. I'm Collin, joined today with Tyler. Normally, we talk Iowa football and basketball on this show, but today we're doing something a little different. It is our annual Big Ten football preview. So welcome in. If you're not an Iowa fan, we encourage you to stay and listen to this episode. You know, last year we did a really good job with this, incorporating the Phil Steele and what he kind of thinks the Big Ten is going to shape out, because let's be honest, no one really cares what I think or what Tyler thinks, because, you know, we're just an average fan. But Phil Steele, on the other hand, man, does he put in the work between talking to all the coaches, obviously all the research that he has to do, all the data that he uses. There is so much information in that magazine. It's almost like too much because it's kind of overwhelming, but that is what we're going to do today, is take in kind of stuff that Phil Steele thinks and says in that magazine and apply it to this Big Ten preview. I encourage you to stay until the end, because that is when the chart is revealed, and I'll talk more about that later in this episode. But what that does is it takes into account a bunch of different data points that I take from Phil Steele. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can really see the difference between the top of the league and the bottom of the team by just looking at that chart. So Tyler, let's begin here with the Phil Steele 1 through 18, what he thinks the Big Ten is going to finish, starting at the top: Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, USC, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Washington, Wisconsin, Rutgers, Michigan State, UCLA, Northwestern, Maryland, and Purdue.
I think the first thing, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, it really feels like those four teams have kind of, or, you know, will be kind of the powerhouse teams of the Big Ten. And no shock that they're all in the top four for me. That's like the first thing that jumps out. I mean, I know, you know, you've got Illinois sneaking up in the top five as well, a team that Phil Steele is pretty dang high on. And I think a lot of people are high on as a potential, you know, dark horse candidate to make the playoff. You know, could this be last year's Indiana? You know, the last thing, you know, was Indiana a 1-year wonder last year, or are they going to stay atop of the Big Ten? Phil Steele has them at 6th right now, which honestly, they could make some noise again this year. I think everyone thinks this might have been a 1-year wonder. I'm not so sure of that.
Yeah, I think Michigan at 4, I think could happen, but it really depends on the quarterback position. Bryce Underwood, obviously a freshman. They're really high on him. Will he start, though, or will it be Mikey Kings from Fresno State? That's going to be interesting to see, and I really think it's going to come down to if they get good quarterback play, because last year the quarterback play was atrocious. It was like 2023 Deacon Hill for Iowa, really bad. And so if they get good quarterback play, they already have a good defense. They have a pretty good stable of running backs, wide receivers, kind of iffy, but that's going to be interesting to see. Kind of surprised that he has Michigan ahead of Illinois. And another team here is Nebraska, right? In the top half. I feel like every year they're kind of makes their way in the top half, but I actually kind of agree for this year because they have the easiest schedule in the Big Ten, and we'll review this here in a little bit. But then when you factor in, okay, year 2 for Dylan Raiola, and you saw last year he was very kind of inconsistent, but as a true freshman starting in the Big Ten, not a bad year. I mean, honestly, yeah. I mean, what do you expect? And now they bring in full-time offensive coordinator Dana Holgerson. I thought that was a great hire by them last year, bringing him in just to be like an analyst, and then he ends up being a full-timer. And I think that's really going to help. Emmett Johnson, the running back, had over 500 yards their last 4 games with Dana as their offensive coordinator. So I just think overall, easy schedule. They have some good wide receivers, Dylan Raiola, Dana. The biggest question for them, though, is their defensive line. They're losing like everybody. So they have to replace their entire defensive line, which, you know, bring in some transfers. You might be able to replace them, but they had some studs there. So I expect them to be pretty good this year. And then you go kind of down the list, you know, Minnesota, in my opinion, it all relies, similar to Michigan, on their quarterback. They're starting a redshirt freshman, Drake Lindsay. You know, can he be, as a redshirt freshman, do what it takes to win at this level? We'll have to wait and see on that. Yeah. And then Washington, to me, kind of a surprise team for me, because I really do feel like they have what it takes to be pretty good. They have a really good quarterback in Damon Williams. He threw for 8 touchdowns and 1 interception his last 2 games last year starting. I can't even. I don't even know who their starter was before. Was it Will Rogers? I think that might have been
Will
it.
Rogers. Yep. I
Yep.
think it was.
So he started
Yep.
most of the year, and then Williams came in towards the end and had a fantastic last two games. And it wasn't just against two bad teams. Like they played two pretty good teams to end the season. And you look at Washington going into last year, man, like they had one of the toughest schedules in the Big Ten. You were replacing literally the entire team. And they still had a pretty good season. I think they went like 6-7, which isn't bad considering how many players they lost, how tough their schedule was. They have a stud running back this year for them. They have still a tough schedule, but it's way more manageable. And so I expect them to really take that next step in year two in the Big Ten. And then obviously their coach, Jed Fish, he's a great coach. And I think they're only going to get better. And then lastly here is Wisconsin, because I really do think Wisconsin has a good football team. I think this is Luke Fickell's best team. But the problem is their schedule. Yeah. Their schedule is very tough. And that actually is a good transition to our next topic. And that is looking at the strength of schedules for all these teams. Because in my opinion, I don't care how good you are. I don't care how many players you bring back and all that. It all comes down to the schedule. And we're going to review some of these. We're not going to do every team in the Big Ten because that would be super boring, but we're going to go into a few of the tougher schedules and then some of the easier schedules. So let's start with Wisconsin here. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys listening probably have already seen their schedule, but I just can't imagine, like as an Iowa fan, having this schedule. Just unbelievably tough.
I mean, you've said it multiple times on this podcast. If people, new people are tuning in for the first time, like if you were saying if this was Iowa's schedule, you're just looking forward to 2026 already.
Yep. I mean, it's
brutal. I mean, they had a home and home schedule with Alabama last year. They played Bama at home. Now this year in the non-conference, they do have to go on the road for that game. Collin, you look at this stretch. I'm looking at the middle of the season, starting October 14th. They go to Michigan, and they come back home for Iowa. They have a home game against Ohio State, and then they got to travel to Eugene, Oregon, in a stretch of essentially 4 weeks. And
terrible.
Then you got a team like Washington right after that back at home. Like, again, who you just mentioned, Damon Williams, I think one of the more exciting players in the Big Ten. Like, you look at it, and then at Indiana, home against Illinois,
who might be a playoff team.
Correct. Yeah. And then at Minnesota. So it's like there's no gimmies in this schedule. There really isn't.
There's 3 gimmies, and that's it. And it's all like in the first half of the season.
Correct. The latter half of their schedule is absolutely brutal. And I agree with you. Like if I'm a Wisconsin fan, it's like, man, I just hope to somehow find a way to find a bowl game. But even that is just, it's asking a lot. I think if they can get 6 wins in this schedule, that would be a successful season. I really believe that.
Yeah, I think that's a win if they can get to 6 wins. I mean, if they could get to 7, that would be really good. I mean, every road game for them is tough. At Alabama, at Michigan, at Oregon, at Indiana, at Minnesota. I mean, that's all 5 are tough. There's not just one like for example, like Iowa, right? Even though it might be a little tough, but like at Rutgers, right? Like they don't have a team like that on the schedule that they play on the road. Like it's tough. The only team that they avoid this year is Penn State. That'd be like the only, I guess, pro about their schedule. And, some would think and some would say, and I agree that Penn State's probably the best team in the Big Ten. All right, the next hardest schedule is UCLA. And I find this team interesting, right? Because they got a whole lot interesting when they brought in Nico Iamaleava. I think that's how you pronounce it, or somewhere close to that. I did my best. But bringing him in was great, right? But, and we'll get more into UCLA here in a little bit, not as good as a roster like he had at Tennessee, and very, very tough schedule. Second hardest, according to Phil Steele.
Yeah, obviously that whole situation kind of ended not so great for him with Tennessee, and then he obviously transfers to UCLA. They got a brutal schedule. Again, beginning of the year, home against Utah. I mean, I feel like as a non-conference game, brutal.
Well, then even at UNLV, I mean,
to Vegas, yeah, for sure. So no gimmies in the first 2. New Mexico, obviously a gimme, but Penn State's on the schedule, at Indiana, at Ohio State, at USC. I mean, this is the new Big Ten, and it's not going to be, get any easier, but they do not have a favorable schedule in my opinion.
And then you go to Purdue. They have the third hardest schedule, and which really sucks for them because they're bringing in a new coach, Barry Odom from UNLV, and they're bringing in like all new starters. I think they only have two returning starters from last year, one being a kicker. And then not only that, but then, oh, hey, by the way, you have to face the third toughest schedule in the Big Ten. Very, very tough.
Hard to do when you're trying to rebuild a team, right? And trying to, hit the ground running, build some success, continue to get better and better. But when you have a schedule that is very tough, including games at Notre Dame in your non-conference, I mean, that's hard to do. So
very. And then they have the final 4 games for them. I mean, you talk just at Michigan, Ohio State, at Washington, and Washington is one of the toughest places to play at. That's a really tough place to play.
Oh,
and I think they went undefeated last year at home. So that's really tough. And then we won't go into their schedule for the Rutgers, but they have the 4th toughest. You go back to last year at this time, I think everybody was talking about like Rutgers being maybe the surprise team because they had a really easy schedule last year. They avoided Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State. Now this year, your final 2 games are at Ohio State and Penn State. So good luck. It's pretty tough. And then Oregon at number 5. And this is where it gets a little interesting with Oregon because I expect them to be really good this year. Again, I really like the quarterback Dante Moore, but their schedule is pretty tough. And, their road games at Iowa, at Penn State, at Washington, they have to go 3 time zones away at Rutgers. Kind of tricky. Yeah. And you're bringing in a highly talented quarterback, but not a very experienced quarterback, right? You do lose some players on the outside. So I still think they're going to have a great year, but I don't think they're going to go undefeated by any means in the regular season.
What you hit the nail on the head with the new quarterback coming in. I think, he's very talented and he's going to play well, but he's just inexperienced. And there's a lot of games on the schedule that, he's going to have to overcome those tough environments like you were just mentioning. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Oregon does this year. I agree. I think they'll be one of the better teams of the Big Ten, but I agree. I don't think I think they're losing a game or 2 on the schedule for sure.
Now let's go to the easiest schedules in the Big Ten. And it's really 3 teams that, we all feel like are probably going to be pretty good. And the schedule is one of the big reasons. The first one, Nebraska. They have the easiest schedule according to Phil Steele. They avoid Ohio State. They avoid Indiana. They avoid Illinois. Like those are some of the top teams. They get 4 home games in a row. They play Northwestern at home. They get USC at home. They open up the season against Cincinnati, but that game is in Kansas City where 95% of the fans are going to be Nebraska fans. So that's essentially going to be a home game for them. They'll take care of business there. So just overall, I mean, this is a very manageable and easy schedule. And then I am kind of surprised that Indiana is ranked 17 or the second easiest when you have to, they have a 3-game stretch here, home against Illinois, at Iowa, which that's a tough place to play at Oregon. And then later on the season, you have to play at Penn State. So, it's tougher than their schedule last year because you go back to last year's schedule, it was really Ohio State and that was it. Right. And so they're going to have some tough opponents here. And this is why I think they're going to be good this year again, but they're probably not going to go 11-1. If they go 9-3, that's still a fantastic year, especially when you consider like Indiana as a program, right? But definitely harder than it appears. I'm really surprised that they're ranked 17th or the second easiest in my opinion. And then Illinois, they're the third. They have the third easiest schedule, and obviously this goes in with the flow of you have 19 starters back, easy schedule. Okay, this is the year for Illinois to do it, right? This is the year that they can make the college football playoffs, and it reminds me a lot of Iowa last year, right? Really easy schedule. We bring back a lot of starters. But Iowa, and this is nothing against Illinois, but I feel like they might be similar to Iowa here, where when the expectation is really high, when there's a lot of noise, that's when you underperform. And that's what I'm a little nervous about with Illinois this year, is because everybody's talking college football playoffs. Everybody's talking about how good they're going to be. Okay, well, similar to Iowa last year, we lost some games that we should not have lost, and it kind of derailed the season. And all it takes is like Illinois, week 4, they play at Indiana, right? Ohio State, later on the season at Washington. You start losing some of those games, and 9-3 is still a good season, but that's not college football playoffs, or that's not what maybe some people expected in Champaign with 19 starters back. So at Wisconsin, second last game of the year, that's going to be tough. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think, and I mentioned it earlier, it's like, could Illinois be last year's Indiana? And I posed this question to you kind of when we were kind of prepping for this show, and you were like, see, you could say that, but India didn't have that. And you mentioned, I'm kind of taking your words here, but it's like, you made a great point. And you're like, Indiana had no pressure last year. They had no expectations to do anything.
Yeah.
And so nobody, now with Illinois, everyone's kind of throwing those expectations onto them before the season even starts. Like, oh, this team should make the playoffs. And it's like, well, everybody on their schedule is going to know that too. And they're going to want to try to beat them. So I think that's an excellent point you make there.
All right, so let's now switch to the individual units, and Phil Steele obviously ranking each unit: quarterback, running back, wide receivers or receivers, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, and secondary. And what I do is, if you're watching this on YouTube, great chart here that you're going to be seeing right now. If you get a green box, that means that you're in the top 15 in the country of what Phil Steele thinks that you're a top 15. So that's really damn good, right? That's like elite level. Light blue box is your position anywhere from 16 to 40th in the country. Orange is 41 through to 76. And then white is you weren't ranked at all. You're obviously beyond the half. So not very good, right? So this chart, I think, it does an excellent job kind of representing. And now this isn't the main chart that I was talking about earlier. That's going to be coming on later this show, but this is just for individual units. And as you can see here, Penn State, and this is why everybody thinks they're going to be really good, is their top, all 7 units are in the top 15.
When you look down the position groups, they're elite in all categories, and a lot of it is due to the fact that they have a lot of experience coming back, and so that expectation is there for them to win the Big Ten this year. If there's a year that Penn State is going to finally get over the hump, if James Franklin's ever going to win some big games, it's got to be this year, right?
Well, that's the thing. Big games and with James Franklin.
That's 4-20 as a big,
it's not good
head coach in the Big Ten. So
he finally, like last year was finally the year where he won some big games, especially like in the college football playoffs, right?
For sure.
So maybe they
gain that experience there, and with Ohio State kind of losing their talent, this might be the year for them to get them. So, and
then you see Ohio State there outside their quarterback position, which Julian's saying he's obviously very talented, just lacks experience. But when you have the best wide receiver in the country in Jeremiah Smith, and not just him, but you have some other really good wide receivers too, I think they'll be just fine. Ohio State's, I don't think it's talked about enough. I think everybody's talking about Penn State here. I think Ohio State's still going to be really good this year. And obviously it does come down to quarterback play. I get that. But as long as Julian Sane is decent, they're very talented. And you can see here, I mean, they're ranked in the top 15 in every other category. Similar with Oregon. I mean, Dante Moore, I don't think Phil Steele's giving these guys enough credit because they haven't really done anything. I mean, Oregon, Michigan here all have orange boxes, which means Phil Steele ranked them anywhere from 41 to 76. I don't know if I agree with that because it's like, man, you're talking some talented quarterbacks here, but I get it. I get why you do that because you got to see it to really know if they are going to be good. But, you take away that. I mean, those teams, I mean, they're talent across the board. And then, I mean, look at Illinois and Indiana. We were just talking about them, with their schedules. And then you see here, not only are their schedules manageable, but you got talent across the board at every position group. And with like Indiana, for example, they lost some players, but every key player that they needed back is back. On defense, defensively, their best defensive lineman back, best linebackers back. They got, their wide receiver, can't think of his name. I would have to look it up, but, really good. I really like their quarterback from Cal, Fernando Mendoza, really good quarterback. He might even be better than Curtis Wark. Maybe not, but I kind of maybe think he will. So, I think Indiana, I'm really high on them. I really am.
Yeah, I mean, the talent, like you said, the talent is there, and they hit, it seems like Kurt Cignetti is just a master in using the transfer portal because it seems like, in his first 2 years, he's hit on a lot of key players. The Elijah Surratt, I think, is the wide receiver that you were
that's who it
referencing.
is.
And so, he's back, like you said, and now they get a experienced Fernando Mendoza from Cal, and I think he can come in and be as good, if not even maybe better than Curtis Rourke. So I don't think Indiana is going to take that far of a step back, like you said. I think the schedule doesn't maybe help them at all this year, but they're going to be a really good team.
I think another team that we don't really talk about a lot is, I guess we haven't really talked about it at all yet, but that's the team right under Indiana on this chart, and that's USC. I'm not going to say this is a make or break of the year for Lincoln Riley. I don't think he's going to get fired, but you have another bad year. I think the talk is starting to be there, right? Like, okay, are you on the hot seat, right?
I had the same sort of feeling that you're having right now, Con. I don't think Lincoln's fighting for his job this year, because I don't know if the expectation is to necessarily, win the Big Ten, but I do think the pressure is going to be turned up a little bit on him if he has another subpar season, for sure. Because when he got hired, I think the expectation was he was supposed to quickly turn USC around, and I don't think that's happened quite yet. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'll come down to their quarterback play, Jaden Mayava, and then they have another true freshman that was really talented that, he could start, but I think it will be Jaden, just because he replaced Moss last year in the middle of the season, and, he was fine as the year went on. And as you can see here, looking at the chart, I mean, they're top 40 in everything but linebacker. So it's still a very talented team, but it's just going to be interesting, because the one thing that I feel like USC needs to be good at to really be good in the Big Ten is trench play. And how good are they going to be in the trenches? They're always going to have good wide receivers. I feel like they're always going to have a decent quarterback, but how is their offensive line, defensive line? Because that's what's going to win you games, especially late in the season when you're going on the road and playing, like last year, they played at Minnesota. Well, that should be a win for them, but they lost, right? Because it's just
unfamiliar territory.
Yeah, it's just the way it is in the Big Ten. You got to be good up front. And then I think Minnesota, looking on here, they're green for running backs. I mean, they have Darius Taylor back, and then they brought in the leading rusher at Marshall. So even though they have a new quarterback, I think, and they lose Daniel Jackson, the wide receiver from the outside, which is going to be a little tough. But if you have a good running back room, and one thing with Minnesota, I feel like they always have a decent offensive line. They're just going to work the running backs. And I think that will be a good recipe for Minnesota this year, especially starting a redshirt freshman. And then I wanted to point out too, towards the bottom here, UCLA. I mean, going back to, Nico going to UCLA, it's great and all, but the talent compared to what you were surrounded with at Tennessee, it's completely different. And you can see here, Cornfield Steele outside of the top 75 for offensive line and running back. And then you're in the oranges for receiver. And then defensively, you're in the oranges for everything. I mean, that's not very good. So I don't know.
Everybody was questioning the situation, right? I mean, if he was going to transfer, was UCLA the only option at that point? I mean, that's kind of the question, I think, that maybe we'll never know. But the talent drop off from Tennessee to UCLA is pretty significant for sure.
Another team that I kind of wanted to bring up too, and you're going to see this a little bit later in the experience chart, but it's Northwestern, because go back 2 years ago, Northwestern, awful year, or no, 2 years ago, they had a great year. It was very surprising. Everyone thought it was going to be awful. And then last year, they definitely took a step back. Now you go into this year and still really no expectations, but they bring back a lot of experience, and they finally have a decent quarterback, Preston Stone from SMU. I'm really high on him.
I think it's an underrated guy. Yep.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the biggest question is the playmakers for Northwestern. Similar to Iowa, I just feel like, you never know what you're going to get on the outside and things like that. But, you see here, they have a top 40 defensive line. Their offensive line's not bad, so it starts there. You got a decent quarterback. I think they might be better than what maybe some people are maybe thinking. Now, what's better for them or what's good for them? Maybe going 6-6 and going to a bowl game, which wouldn't be bad. And then bottom two teams, I mean, Maryland, Purdue. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of people kind of think they're going to be at the bottom. I mean, you see Purdue, they're outside of the top 75 in literally every unit. There's not one unit that they are in the top 75, according to Phil Steele. In Maryland, they only have 3, and that's wide receiver, linebacker, and secondary. And I think Maryland, from what I was reading, is they're probably going to be starting a true freshman, Malik Washington, which they've done in the past where they've started, true freshmen, and they've had somewhat success with it, but it's going to be interesting to see with Maryland. And that's another coach where Mike Locksley, it's like, how many more chances are you going to get? You have another bad year. Could be his last year at Maryland.
Which is crazy because I feel like Maryland's talent, especially on the outside for the last couple of years at least, has been really good. I mean, I know the Vikings, my NFL team, we just drafted their wide receiver Ty Felton, who was a freaking stud for them. So, but yeah, they just haven't been able to replace that talent, and so it's a good point. I mean, I think they're going to struggle this year. Obviously, Billy Edwards transferring to Wisconsin. I mean, who's their quarterback? Is he going to be anything special? Probably not. And I think they'll struggle this year.
All right. So the next thing that we are going to do is look at Phil Steele's experience chart, where he kind of takes into account the number of seniors in the 2D, takes into account the percentage of total yards coming back, percentage of total tackles coming back. And you could see here, Illinois leads the way. They're actually third in the country, but they are number one in the Big Ten in returning production and experience. And once again, that pairs up well with what we keep hearing, what we kind of talked about so far of why people are so high on Illinois and why they think they might be a dark horse for the playoffs. And then you got the next team that I just talked about before, Northwestern. They're second in the Big Ten in experience coming back. And the teams that are not bolded are teams that didn't make a bowl game. So you can kind of see like, okay, well, maybe, a team like that maybe has a shot now with some experience coming back. Same with like Wisconsin, sixth, I think, in the Big Ten there, but with their schedule, I don't know about that. But, seeing Penn State, they're always talented, but they also have a lot of experience coming back. So that's going to help them even more. And then like teams like, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, they're all towards the bottom, but in my opinion, it's like, does that really matter? Because they're so talented. They bring in so many good transfers. I don't think it really matters for them at all when it comes to this experience chart. And then, hey, I keep saying it, this might be the year for Nebraska, given the easiest schedule in the Big Ten according to Phil Steele, but then being fifth in the Big Ten in returning or with experience coming back. So could see them.
These teams like Illinois and Nebraska, that we've kind of talked about. I mean, they've got the recipe to do it. They haven't done it. And the expectation is to do it. And so that adds that level of pressure. And they've fallen short in the past, and we'll see if they can finally get over the hump this year.
All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at some different trends that Phil Steele does. Kind of unique and different, but it is kind of crazy how when you kind of pull in the data, how it ends up kind of being accurate in a way. All right. The first one is close wins and losses. So teams that were fortunate and won a lot of close games from the previous year are probably not as fortunate the next year. And on the flip side, teams that suffered a lot of close losses the previous year are genuinely undervalued. So how he takes into account the close wins or loss, it's 7 points or less. Net close wins or losses, you minus each other out. So if a team has 5 close wins and 2 close losses, their net close wins are 3, essentially. So let's look at close losses first. Purdue was the only team in the Big Ten with 3 or more net close losses. So that means that they have a 76% chance of having a stronger or the same record this next year. And then 2 net close losses. These teams have a 70% chance of having a stronger year or the same. And that's Iowa, which we haven't really talked about Iowa on this show. I guess we talk so much about Iowa all the time that we kind of want to talk about other teams. But Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Rutgers, USC, and Washington. And it's kind of crazy because, if they end up having better records, I mean, we just talked about a lot of these teams like Nebraska, teams like, Washington, we fully expect USC to rebound. Purdue's a little interesting. We'll see. They were horrible last year. Their record was really bad. So I guess it probably doesn't take much to be improved, but they also are, bringing a new coach, a lot of new players. So we'll see on that. So I don't know.
Yeah. And you think about it, I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, some of these games, they come down to the wire and it comes down to maybe a play or two. And, the thought behind it is, the odds are it'll be in your favor the next time.
All right, let's look at close wins now. So Illinois leads the way. They had 5 close wins last year, net close wins. So according to, the data from the last 24 years, they have almost an 85% chance of having a weaker or same record as last year, which is interesting, right? Because we keep talking Illinois about, are they a dark horse for the playoffs? Well, according to this, a lot of close wins last year. And going back to what I said earlier about, will they be able to manage the expectations, get to the end of the game and it's close? Are they going to be able to win those games this year? I don't know. We'll see. The next one is Michigan. They had 4, close to 85% as well. UCLA at 3, 77%, and then Oregon with 3. So they have a 76%, which once again, with Oregon, I definitely do think, last year they went 12-0. So I don't think that's going to happen. So that is probably going to hit. All right. The next trend is going up / going down. So since 2004, Phil examines teams with significantly easier or harder schedules compared to the previous year. And in those 20 years, the last 20 years, the going up box, 80% of teams have had the same or better record the next year. And then also in that 20-year span, the going down box has had an 88% of teams have had the same or worse record than the next year. So that's pretty telling. And so in the Big Ten, the going up box, Michigan, Maryland, Washington, and Nebraska. And in my opinion, 3 out of those 4, I think, will probably hit. And that's Michigan, Washington, and Nebraska. And then the going down box, Rutgers, Indiana, and Oregon, which I think all 3. I mean, you look at Rutgers last year, once again, they had a very manageable schedule going into last year. Everyone thought, okay, yeah, they should do decent. And they had an okay year, 7-6, but their schedule is really easy. So now they have a tougher schedule. Yeah, might be Greg Schiano's best team since he's been back, but schedule's tougher. So I do think that their record will probably be worse than last year. And then we already talked about Indiana and Oregon, probably, both still having great years, but they had such good records last year that will they match that? I don't think so.
Yeah. And I mean, Indiana, Oregon, like you just said, they had really good records last year. They were the hunters last year, right? Now I think this year they're going to be the hunted. And so teams kind of know what to expect, especially obviously with Oregon. I mean, Oregon's a given, but Indiana, nobody's going to be shocked when they play Indiana, how good they are. They're going to be ready for that game.
The next one is Phil Steele's most surprised team. So these are non-preseason AP top 10 that has a decent shot of going to the playoffs and winning a natty. I think it's more just going to the playoffs because, winning natty is obviously pretty tough. And so on here, he has Illinois, which makes sense, USC, Nebraska, and then he has Iowa as the roulette chip, aka the long shot is what he calls it. So those 4 teams for the most surprised. But yeah, so those are some different trends that I always find kind of interesting to see. And once again, the data is kind of backed up with the results the last, 20 years. I like, for example, that going up, going down box. 88%. That is actually unreal how he has hit that. And so I kind of take all that stuff into consideration when reviewing and previewing the Big Ten. All right. So now here we are. This is the big finale. This is what I call the graph. I did it last year, and I just thought it was just a cool way to really see the Big Ten in one picture, especially if you're watching this on YouTube and seeing the separation between the top and the bottom. And I'm going to do my best to explain the graph on this, and I hope people understand it. So essentially, it is 8 columns of different things that I find important for a team using Phil Steele's data. So the first one being units ranked 1 through 40. So go back earlier in this episode, we looked at the graph of individual units from quarterback all the way to defensive backs. And for this one specifically, I'm just looking at the 1 through 40 because I feel like if you're in the top 40 in the country, that's a pretty good unit for you, right? Like if you're 24th at wide receiver, that's pretty damn good. If you're 124th, yeah, no, we don't count that. So you get a green box if you have 6 to 7 units ranked in the top 40. You get a blue box if you have 4 to 5 units ranked in the top 40. And then you get a red box if you're under 4. So the next one is strength of schedule. This is the only one that's going to be flip-flopped. And what I mean by that is normally 1 through 6 is green. Well, on this one, 1 through 6 is red because that means you have a really tough schedule. 7 through 12, you get a blue, you're kind of in between, and green is 13 through 18, right? Because 18, being Nebraska, has the easiest schedule according to Phil Steele in the Big Ten. All right, the next two are ones that I did not include last year. These are new, but I just find them to be so important for a team. And that is the first one being quarterback and offensive line combination average ranking. I just feel like to be a good team, you got to be good at quarterback and offensive line. You can't really be good at one or the other. Because if you're good at quarterback, but really bad at the offensive line, yeah, your good quarterback can make some things happen and you might win a game or two because of that. But over the course of the season, it's going to affect you. And so how I get this number is I'm just going to use Iowa, for example. According to Phil Steele, he has Iowa 7th in the Big Ten in quarterback ranking. So he has Mark Gronowski at 7. He has the offensive line 2nd in the Big Ten. And so the average ranking between the two is a 4.5. And so they get a green box because if you are situated between 1 to 6.5, you get a green box. If you are situated from 7 to 12.5, blue, and 13 through 18th, red. The next one, similar to the one I just talked about, but this one involves the trenches because I feel like, especially in the Big Ten, you have to be good in the trenches. You have to have a good offensive line, defensive line to really be really, really good. I don't care how talented you are. It starts up front. I'm going to use Iowa, for example, because this is an Iowa themed podcast. He has a defensive line ranking at a 3, and he has the offensive line ranking at a 2 in the Big Ten. So the average is a 2.5. So Iowa is going to get a green box because once again, 1 to 6.5 green and so forth. The next one is experience. We talked about this earlier. 1 to 6. If you have the most experience coming back, you're going to be at a 1. So you're going to get a green box. 7 through 12, blue. 13 through 18, red. And then power pool. This is taking into account the talent of the team. So he goes 1 through 18 in the Big Ten, talent of the team. And once again, I'm not going to keep saying it, but you kind of get the point. Green box, you're in the top half. Blue box, middle. Red towards the bottom. The next one is special teams. I think special teams is very important. I don't think a lot of people talk about it. As an Iowa fan, we get it. We get how special teams really does impact a game and it does help.
Yep.
And then coaching, which is obviously really big as well. You can't be a team with a bad coach and expect to do good in the Big Ten. No, you got to have good coaching. So that is how I come up with it all. And as you can see here on this graph, I have the teams to the left and they're in order of how Phil Steele predicted the Big Ten, which we talked about earlier in this episode. But yeah, you can see here. A lot of greens and blues towards the top and a lot of reds towards the bottom.
No surprise. Again, Penn State at the top, the talent that they have on the team, the experience that they have on the team, the fact that they don't have one of the tougher, schedules in the Big Ten. I think that makes sense. I think a lot of people are picking Penn State this year. I've said, at least in terms of as an Iowa fan and the teams that, are on our schedule, I've picked Penn State as the hardest game. This is their year. If there's ever going to be a year, it's going to be this year. And so it makes sense why they're at the top. Ohio State, obviously not far behind them. The only thing that they're lacking, we've talked about already, is that experience. But again, no surprise when they're churning out a lot of talent year in and year out. So Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, all at the top. Kind of like I had mentioned before, it's like I think going forward, you're going to see this trend a lot just because that's where that talent pool is right now.
Yep, exactly.
And so I think that might be a trend going forward too. I'll be curious to see years to come how that shapes out.
And look at the offensive line and defensive line combination ranking. Look at how they're all in the top 5. That is how you do good in the Big Ten. You got to be good in the trenches. And if you are not, you go towards the bottom of the Big Ten, you see, Michigan State, UCLA. Yeah. There's a reason why they're probably not going to have great years. Is because the offensive line, defensive line isn't good.
That's actually a great point that you make there. And you look at a team like Oregon, back how many years ago, they used to be this flashy team, right? And you think of them as kind of a, this up-tempo, go team. And that they've really changed that under Dan Lanning. They're a physical team that relies on the trenches. That seems like they always get really great offensive and defensive linemen. And so, no surprise there that they're at the top. And
speaking of which, I'm going to go down a little bit here. We will look at some of these teams ahead, but look at Iowa, 2.5. So they're second in the Big Ten, according to Phil Steele, in that defensive line and offensive line combination. I think they're ranked. Phil Steele has them ranked 8th in the country for offensive line and 8th in the defensive line. So And just Iowa in general. I know we haven't really talked much about Iowa, and we kind of did that on purpose because we always talk about Iowa. But I mean, they're one of the few teams that have no red boxes, right? You look at units ranked, they have 4, which is blue box. I mean, strength of schedule. Yeah, it's tougher than last year, but it's still pretty manageable at number 9. QB offensive line combination. We haven't seen this a lot before. 4.5 because we finally actually have a decent quarterback in Mark Gronowski. Experience isn't bad, and you're always going to be good in special teams or number 1 in special teams. So this is where, like, for me, and I, maybe I'm biased or I'm just an Iowa fan, but this is why I think Iowa could have a special year. Obviously, yeah, their schedule is way tougher, but it could happen. One other thing about it, and this is very random, I don't know why I thought about this, but something that we didn't really talk about, Jim Knowles going to Penn State as defensive coordinator. I think that's huge.
Yeah, that is so underrated because Penn State's always known for having a really good defense. But this is one of the top defensive minds in the game. And he just won a national championship off Ohio State. And I think it was a shock to a lot of people that he went to Penn State. But, that's kind of his dream job as a coordinator. He wanted to go to Penn State. And he got that job. And it seems like Penn State, similar to Ohio State last year, right, has that feel that they're kind of going all in this year.
Yep, exactly. And then, looking more at this chart, we'll just spend a little bit more time on here. Illinois, Indiana, all greens, a lot of greens and some blues, but no reds. So fully expect them. I know we keep talking about it, but fully expect them to be pretty good. USC, and this is where it's tough because I do think they're going to be good, but their strength of schedule, their experience in the middle of the pack for quarterback offense line combination, defense line, O-line combination. So it's just going to be interesting. Like, they are a team that I'm very intrigued to watch this year and just see how they do because once again, if they have a somewhat bad year, man, it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle all that.
I know you're kind of going down the list. I kind of had, your thoughts real quick, get your thoughts on Michigan State, right? They're a team that, Aiden Childs and a guy like Nick Marsh on the outside, really, really talented guys, but you're seeing on this chart a lot of red.
I don't know. I mean, it's second year with Jonathan Smith. So Aiden Childs last year was very inconsistent, like madly inconsistent, right? The one game that he did look really good, it was against Iowa, which frustrated the hell out of me. Their entire team looked good against us last year. So I think that they'll be decent, but I still think they're still in kind of that rebuild mode.
Well, they have units ranked is at a 1. So it's saying that they talent wise overall, they have some good players, but not maybe across the board.
Yeah. And then look at their O-line, D-line combination and special teams at 17th. We talk about how important special teams are. So I don't know. I think they might still be a year away from being able to get back to kind of maybe what they used to be. Nebraska, once again, I think what's holding them back potentially is their defensive line. I mean, once again, they lose a lot of guys on the defensive line. If they have their defensive line figured out, everything else is pretty good. Yeah. And then right below Iowa is Minnesota. This is where I think PJ Fleck excels well at, is when they have no expectation. And you go back to last year, they had a pretty tough schedule. This year, way more manageable. They're 13th in the Big Ten, according to Phil Steele. Once again, it really comes down to their quarterback play. Drake Lindsey, redshirt freshman. If he can have an okay year, because here's the thing. I think Bosmer, I think that's what his name was last year.
Yeah.
He was actually a pretty good quarterback. And he came from the FCS ranks. So I'm hoping that's what Mark Gronowski can be like, right? Coming from South Dakota State. He was pretty good. And you had Daniel Jackson, which I talked about earlier. And so it's going to be interesting. Their defense, they always have a decent defensive line. Their secondary, I think they're losing like both their corners, but they brought in some transfers. They have that stud safety.
Coy Perch.
Yep. So I think Minnesota, I think they're going to be pretty decent this year. I don't know how good, but like I don't think they're going to be bad. And then I think the last team that I just want to point out one more time, and that's Wisconsin, because once again, I really do think this is Luke Fickell's most talented team since being at Wisconsin. They go out and they get a new offensive coordinator because the last one was a joke. I mean, the fact that they even wanted to run air raid at Wisconsin when it's November and cold and you just don't get the talent like the Southern schools do. I didn't understand that. And it did not work.
It bit him in the ass for sure.
Yeah. So they go out and get Kansas offensive coordinator, which I think will dramatically help them. They're going to go back to kind of running the football. That's what they've been saying. That's what they're going to focus on. They have not had a healthy quarterback since Luke Fickell's been there. So Ken Billy Edwards, or if it's Daniel O'Neal from San Diego State, if those two guys can be decent. But the problem is look at that strength of schedule, man. Like number one, not just number one in the Big Ten, but number one in the country in the hardest schedule. So as much as I think that they will be improved, it's going to be hard to tell because of their schedule.
A hard schedule and not really knowing what you're going to get with your quarterback is such a bad combination to have to try to have success, I feel like, because you play those tough games and a guy that doesn't, that you don't know what you're going to get with that quarterback. They could make just horrendous mistakes and the game can get away from you in a blink of an eye. And that's what you fear with playing some of those teams. I mean, hell, like we mentioned, they got Bama in the non-conference. How terrible of a schedule is that?
Exactly.
It's crazy.
That's pretty rough. So, but yeah, that is the chart. And you can see once again, the bottom teams, a lot of red there. Just comes to talent, comes to coaching, special teams, all that, it's why they're towards the bottom. Now, can one of those teams have a surprise year? Anything can happen. You never know. But just looking at this, it's telling you that more than likely, those teams are going to finish more towards the bottom. And so before we end, this is just something fun that I did. This is how I kind of envision the Big Ten is gonna end conference record wise, not total record. And so I actually have Ohio State and Penn State towards the top at 8-1, Oregon at 7-2. And then I have the next 5 teams finishing 6-3 in the Big Ten, and that is Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, and USC. And then I have Nebraska, Washington, and Wisconsin finishing with at 5-4. I have Minnesota at 4-5. Michigan State and Northwestern at 3-6. Rutgers and UCLA at 2-7. And then Maryland at 1-8, and then Purdue at 0-9. I just couldn't find a win for Purdue, but I guarantee you they'll probably win a game. It's just there's probably going to be a game in there where they upset a team or something, but it's like when you're going game by game, it's just so hard to be able to say, okay, they're going to win this game or whatever. And so in it all, I think, in my opinion, that the 2 surprise teams. Now, when I say surprise team, I'm not saying like, oh, they're going to win the conference and they're going to make the playoffs. I'm just talking like, I think they're going to be maybe a little bit better than maybe what people are maybe thinking. And for me, it's Washington and potentially Northwestern. Like I really do think that they will rebound after a bad year last year, better quarterback. I think Illinois, I don't know if I trust them with the expectation. That's the only thing. Now they might, and that's great. I have nothing against Illinois, honestly. Like when it comes to rivals, maybe basketball, but football, I like Brett Bielema. I just think I fear that they will drop a game that they shouldn't drop. And it's just because, and it's nothing, I'm not trying to make fun of them. It's just, I know what it's like as an Iowa fan when there's a lot of expectations, we end up not doing very good. It's usually the years where we have no expectations, and that is when we do good. That's why I'm hoping this year, because we don't really have much expectations. That's why I'm hoping we have a good year. Indiana, I don't think they will not drop. They'll be kind of right where they are at. Record-wise might be slightly worse, but they will still be a great team. And then I do think Nebraska is another team that I think finally, because it's every year, they're always talked about, but I do think finally this is the year that they could finish with 8 or 9 wins. 10 wins, I think, is maybe a stretch, but 8 or 9 wins, which would be, honestly, a really good year for Nebraska, trying to get back to kind of where they want to be at. So I think it will be Ohio State and Penn State in the Big Ten championship. I do have Penn State losing their one game at Ohio State, because when is the last time they beat Ohio State? When's the last time James Franklin? I don't even know if has James Franklin even ever beat Ohio State? I don't think he has.
No.
So what makes me think that they're going to go into Ohio State and beat them? Maybe they will, but history tells you they won't. And so if that is the case, and if Ohio State only drops one game, let's say they lose to, I think I actually have them losing at Washington, just because that's going to be such a tough game to win at. So I have them making the Big Ten championship. What are your thoughts on all that? I mean, do you kind of agree with some of this I said?
I like your Washington pick. I really do. I mean, I think you've made a compelling argument. I think they have a favorable schedule. One of the more underrated quarterbacks in the Big Ten that nobody's talking about. And just the fact that, like you just mentioned, last year they didn't lose at home. So it's just a tough place to play. And I think that sets up well. The other thing, and it's kind of interesting.
I was just going to say, they have a stud. I don't know if I might have brought it up. I mean,
Jonah Coleman.
Such a long episode. Maybe I did bring it up earlier in this episode. But yeah, Jonah Coleman had over 1,000 yards last year. He's back too. So, yeah.
And the other thing I was going to say is I think Ohio State, defending national champion, is loving this right now. Everyone's talking about Penn State being this new king of the Big Ten, and they're just sitting there saying, "Hey, don't look at us, don't mind us. We'll see you in the end." So I like that matchup, and again, history tells you what James Franklin record is 4-20, I believe, against top 10 teams since he's taken over Penn State. So I mean, man, I mean, this is the year for them. And so if it's not this year, I don't know when it's going to be. I mean, when you go out and you keep Drew Aller, you go out and you get some stud receivers, you have a great defense. I mean, this is a year. They have two really, really good running backs. You can't mess it up. You just can't. Nope. You just can't. All right. Well, that will do it for this episode. Our goal is that anybody listening to this, you know a little bit more now about the Big Ten. That is really all we're striving to do. We don't know how it's going to end up. We don't even want to act like we think we know how it's going to end up, because I'm sure it's going to be way different. Really, we do this to get you guys. So instead of you having to do all the research, you can let us do the research, and let Phil Steele do all the research, and then for you guys, just knowing a little bit about the Big Ten. So when we get to August 28th, which I think, that's that Thursday night, Nebraska, Cincinnati, and got some other games on. You're kind of familiar with, okay, what's to come, right? Like who's a quarterback, who, some good players, and things like that. So that's the goal of this episode. And that's why we always enjoy doing it. And hopefully we can continue doing this annual Big Ten preview every single year. So that will do it for this episode. Thank you guys all for listening. Once again, if you are not an Iowa fan, which I'm sure there are going to be a lot of fans in here that are not Iowa fans, I thank you. I know this will be the only episode you listen to, because I mean, why would you want to listen to a bunch of Iowa episodes if you're not an Iowa fan? So I get that. So I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for joining us today. And then for the Iowa fans that are listening, thank you for coming back. And we hope to see you on the next episode, which will be Big Ten Media Days. I'll have an episode out going over all that. That will be published at the end of July. And then before long, it is fall camp and the start of the Iowa football season. So that will do it for this episode. Thank you guys all for listening, and go Hawks.